Am I the a-hole for divorcing my wife after she asked for an open relationship and now I'm thriving while she isn't? Hey Reddit, I'm in a bit of a situation and I'm starting to wonder if I'm the bad guy here. I'll try to keep this short, but there's some context that might be important. So, my 34M, wife, 32F, and I have been married for 7 years. We've had a pretty great life together. I've built a successful business. I do pretty well for myself. I'll leave it at that. And we've traveled all over the world, live in a beautiful house, the whole deal. I've always thought we were happy. Out of nowhere a few months ago, my wife tells me she wants to open up our marriage. She reasoned that we were missing out on experiences and she wanted to explore her options, but she made it clear she still loved me and didn't want to break up. I was blindsided. We've never had issues with intimacy or connection, and honestly, I'm in great shape. I've always been attentive to her needs, and I just didn't see it coming. At first, I was against the idea, but then I figured, okay, why not see what happens? If this is what she wants, I'm not going to stop her. I agreed to give it a try, but with the condition that it goes both ways. If she's out meeting other guys, I'm going to meet other women too. Well, here's where things get a little ironic. As soon as we opened the relationship, I started meeting women left and right. I'm talking crazy success on dating apps, people I meet through work, and even casual flings while I'm traveling for business. Turns out, being wealthy, fit, and confident tends to attract a lot of attention. I'll spare you the details, but let's just say I haven't exactly been lonely. My wife, on the other hand? Yeah, not so much. She's been on a few dates, but nothing's panned out for her. A couple of the guys ghosted her, and she's mostly frustrated that it's not what she imagined. Meanwhile, I'm having a blast. After a few months of this, I started to realize that I didn't need to stay in a marriage where my wife was looking for an excuse to cheat on me. If she wanted to be single, then let's make it official. I filed for divorce, and now she's upset and saying that I'm punishing her for wanting to explore herself. But honestly, I just don't see the point in staying married if we're both dating other people. Why play house? So now she's telling our friends that I'm being selfish and that I'm only divorcing her because she's not having as much success as I am in this open thing, which is absolutely not the case. I just think we're on different paths now, and I've realized I don't need to stick around when I can literally have my cake and eat it too. Am I the a-hole for filing for divorce? Or should I have tried harder to make her feel better about a situation she basically created? Edit. To clarify, I didn't start having fun out of spite. I genuinely went into this thinking it could work, but it just opened my eyes to the fact that we want different things. Also, the divorce isn't about her failing at the open relationship, it's about me realizing I don't want this life with her anymore. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my sister's boyfriend to get out after he refused to eat the meal I cooked? So, here's what happened. I, 28F, invited my sister, 25F, and her boyfriend, 26M, over for dinner. I love cooking and had spent hours preparing this fancy meal. Homemade pasta, a slow-cooked ragu, a salad, and a tiramisu for dessert. I was really proud of it and excited to have them over. When they arrived, everything was fine at first. We sat down, and I started serving the food. Her boyfriend, let's call him Steve, stared at the pasta for a moment, then looked at me and said, "I don't eat carbs." At first, I thought he was joking, but nope, he was dead serious. He goes on about how he's super into keto and carbs are the enemy. Okay, fine, that's his choice. But when I offered to make him a salad or something else on the spot, he refused and said that I should have known about his diet beforehand. This is where it gets weird. He then pulls out a small Tupperware container from his bag, filled with what looked like boiled chicken and broccoli, and starts to eat it at my dinner table while the rest of us are trying to enjoy the meal I spent hours making. I was stunned and, honestly, kind of insulted. I told him it was rude to bring his own food without mentioning it to me beforehand, and he should have at least given me a heads up. He then goes off about how people need to respect his dietary choices and that I was being controlling by not accommodating his needs. At this point, I'd had enough. I told him, if you can't eat what's served and won't even let me make something else, then maybe you should just get out. He stood up, said something like, "I'm just trying to be healthy," grabbed his Tupperware, and walked out. My sister stayed for a bit, but eventually left too, saying I overreacted. Now my sister's mad at me, saying I embarrassed her boyfriend and made them both feel unwelcome. My mom thinks I should apologize, but my friends are on my side, saying Steve was being incredibly rude. Am I the a-hole for telling him to get out? Date. Am I the a-hole for telling my sister's boyfriend to get out after he refused to eat the meal I cooked? Well, y'all, buckle up because things have escalated in a way I never expected. After my initial post, I figured things would calm down once my sister had time to cool off. Spoiler alert, they did not. So, the day after I told Steve to leave, my sister texted me saying they wanted to talk things through at a family dinner. I assumed it would be just the three of us, maybe at a neutral restaurant, where we could hash it out like adults. Nope. Instead, my sister invites my parents, my brother, and Steve's parents to this dinner at my parents' house, turning it into some kind of weird intervention. I show up thinking it'll just be a casual conversation, but the moment I walk in, Steve's mom, let's call her Carol, is already going off about how Steve has always had special dietary needs and how people who care about him should respect his boundaries. The woman acts like the guy has a life-threatening allergy, not a trendy diet. My mom is sitting there looking super uncomfortable, while my dad's just quietly sipping his beer, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. So, Carol starts listing off Steve's dietary restrictions, and she's acting like I personally offended the whole keto community by serving pasta. Then, brace yourselves, Carol pulls out a folder. Yes, a literal folder, with printouts. She hands one to me, one to my mom, and one to my dad. I'm flipping through this thing, and it's full of Steve's dietary guidelines, suggested meal plans, and even a list of keto-friendly restaurants we could go to in the future. At this point, I'm doing everything I can not to laugh, but it gets worse. Steve pipes up and says he's willing to forgive me for disrespecting his lifestyle if I agree to host a redo dinner where I follow his dietary restrictions to the letter. He says this will prove I'm serious about making amends and respecting his needs going forward. I thought he was joking, but no, he was dead serious. He even pulled out his phone to show me some keto recipe apps that I might find helpful. I was in total shock. My sister, by the way, said absolutely nothing during all of this, just staring at her plate like she wanted to disappear. My mom, bless her, tries to smooth things over by suggesting we all just eat whatever we want when we're together. But Carol snaps, it's not that simple. She says that in their family, they'd all follow keto together. And that's why Steve is so passionate about it. At this point, I've had enough. I stood up and said, look, I'm not redoing the dinner. I'm not making anyone a special keto feast. If Steve can't eat what I cook, that's fine. But bringing his own meal to my dinner without even telling me was disrespectful, and I'm not apologizing for feeling that way. And then, this is where it gets absolutely bonkers. Steve's dad stands up, points at me, and says, this is exactly why Steve doesn't trust women to understand him. They always make it about themselves. The whole room went silent. My dad finally spoke up, saying, I think it's time for you all to leave, and started walking toward the door, basically escorting Steve's parents out. Steve and my sister stayed behind, but Steve was furious. He started yelling about how family should support each other, and then accused me of trying to sabotage their relationship because I'm jealous of what they have. At that point, I just walked out and left the whole mess behind. Here's the kicker, though. A couple of days later, my sister called me and told me she and Steve were taking a break because she needed time to think. Apparently, this whole keto fiasco was the last straw in a long list of controlling behavior from Steve. She didn't realize just how bad it was until the whole family saw it play out at dinner. She even told me that Steve had been trying to get her to follow his diet for months, but she was hiding snacks in her car just to get a break from all the keto madness. So now, Steve's gone full radio silent. My sister is staying with me for the time being, and I'm still getting passive-aggressive texts from Carol about how hurt Steve is and how he's just misunderstood. Honestly, I'm just glad my sister is finally seeing how controlling this guy was. TLDR, Steve's keto obsession led to a full-blown family intervention where his mom handed out dietary guidelines, and now my sister is taking a break from him because she realized how controlling he is. Am I the a-hole? My mom feels my sister should have married my husband instead of me. I am upset at my mom and my sister because of something my mother said, but everyone around me feels I am overreacting. Please be brutally honest in telling me if I am being insecure, or if my mom and my husband are wrong in this. Let me give you a bit of backstory. My husband James, 34M, and I, 29F, were neighbors growing up. My sister, Fran, 34F, was in the same grade as my husband growing up. Everyone knew my sister in school because she was very smart and beautiful. James had a huge crush on her, and all of us knew about it. He asked her out for senior prom, and Fran shot him down, in front of the whole school. They still remained friends, but he moved to a different state for college, and we did not hear much from him, except see him when he came back for holidays. James and I were never friends growing up, since I was in middle school when this happened. In fact, I was much younger than both of them, and they would actively avoid me or involve me in their hangouts and activities. I went to a good college and got my first job in the same city as James. My mom suggested I should contact James since I did not know anyone there. We became friends, and 3 years later, we got married. We both have high-paying jobs and love our life. We moved back to our hometown during COVID-19 as James's mom had health issues, and our jobs allowed us to work remotely. Fran also had a pretty good life. She married when she was 23, and her husband was pretty well off. 2 years ago, Fran discovered that he was cheating on her for almost the entire duration of their marriage with multiple partners, and she decided to break things off. Fran moved back with my mom. Fran had not worked for the entire duration of their marriage and was expecting to gain significant alimony from the divorce. However, due to complications regarding prenup, she barely got anything and is struggling financially. She got a job but is barely able to afford her own place and continues living with my mom. James and I were very supportive of her during the whole process. Since James and Fran were friends growing up, they both have a special bond. They have their inside jokes and stories, and I sometimes feel like a third wheel when we all meet. However, James keeps his distance and has never given me any reason to believe that he has lingering feelings for her. Fran, on the other hand, constantly visits us, like 2 to 3 times a week, and ends up staying for dinner and sleeping in our guest room. I don't mind her coming over, but I do not like the fact that she talks more to James than to me. Also, she always comes over when I am not at home, and I often find them sitting next to each other on the sofa and watching TV when I get home. It sort of reminds me of my childhood when I was locked out of our basement when Fran had friends over, and I would feel left out. Fran is also too comfortable around James and walks around the house in just a towel after her shower when James is around, or sleeps in her underwear in the guest room without locking the door. I have voiced my concerns to her, but she says that we are family, and she does not care. I have also voiced my concerns to James, and he does make efforts now to explain stories and inside jokes if Fran makes them. The main issue happened this weekend. I was hanging out with my mom and Fran last weekend, and Fran was recollecting stories about how James would do her homework and do chores for her growing up. She said, he was so much in love with me, and I felt guilty taking advantage of him. My mom jokingly said to her, I wish you had the wits to marry James than your loser husband, and you would have not been in this situation. Fran smiled after hearing that and nodded, but I was hurt by the comment. I protested to my mom that James was my husband, and I did not want her to make such comments about him. My mom doubled down and said that she feels like it because both James and I are high earners. while Fran is struggling. So, it would make sense if Fran was married to James, and I would be fine since I do not need James to support me financially. She kept on saying that it was hypothetical and just wanted both her daughters to be happy. I did not like those comments and told them to not speak like that about James and my marriage in general. Fran chimed in and told me that I should not take the comments so personally and that I was being too sensitive. However, I had a fight with both of them, and I left. When I came home and told James, he also sided with my mom and Fran and told me that her mom just made a harmless joke. I also raised the issue of Fran's behavior around our house, and he told me that this is between me and my sister, and he is not going to tell Fran about what she can or cannot wear in our house. However, I am just feeling really bad since the situation, and despite everyone apologizing to me, things just don't feel right. Am I wrong here in reacting the way I did? Or does everyone else have a point, and I should be more secure about my relationship with James?